Okay, we're here in beautiful Lapasse, overlooking the Ottawa River, and I'm here with Carl Lawton, and I got an email last night about the carbon tax, so I thought, why don't we talk about it in person? Now, just looking at the river because it's so captivating, is this where the whitewater rafters go by, or is that further?
That's downstream.
Downstream.
From here, yes.
Okay, and we're on the other side of the road from the water. Were you impacted by the high water here?
Not from the river, no, not at all.
No? And what about your neighbors? Were they all okay?
For a few hundred yards in the upstream direction, that way, there were a few there that were inundated, their basements, but as you go further upstream to the, they call it near the bay, many of them were totally wiped. You know, it's pretty sad. Some of them now are just starting to rebuild. Others, I think, may have to abandon the property.
Now, we were down that way in April and May, and it was the first worst place that we had been. We couldn't even finish driving down the road. People were using canoes to go back and forth from their vehicles.
Yeah. So, my friend was shuttling people with his boat. You know, they had a boat ban on the river, but him and others were actually using their outboard motors and picking people up and taking them in because there was no other way for them to get in or out. And of course, the armed forces were here and the Coast Guard. They were doing the same.
Yeah, well, everybody pulled together. It was great to see.
It was amazing. It was really amazing. Small community. It was very impressive.
And some of the communities that weren't impacted lent help, so that's the way it is in the valley.
It should be.
I think it's the biggest. People here have the biggest hearts in all of Canada.
I really like this place. I don't think I'd ever move back to a larger community. It's maybe a little too peaceful in the winter, because you can count the number of cars that go by in one hand on a cold day. But it's a beautiful, beautiful little community.
So, the email you sent me last night was a question on the carbon tax benefit.
Yes.
Okay, so tell me what your question is and why you're asking it.
Well, I was asking the question because I'd understood from all the news and the quotes from the Liberal cabinet ministers that, especially Minister of the Environment, would say that you're going to get back more than you pay. You're going to get it back. And then I heard about refunds, the word refund used, rebates. And anyways, when I did my taxes, the chap that helped me prepare it said you've got taxable income, so this wouldn't benefit you. And I wasn't sure what he meant by that, but I know a lot of medical expenses that didn't come into it because they too are only applied against taxable income. So a lot of started to hit home that if you're low income, you could have a lot of expenses, medical, and now this carbon tax thrown on top of all the other. Because you live low income, you still use the same amount of energy to heat your house and cook and use your appliances and that. So I was thinking, well, it was only $169 that mine came out to, but I expected I'd be getting a check with that. I got some other, some additional income for the old age security, which I really appreciate and need. And this I thought, well, I'll get back $169. So I waited and I haven't seen anything. So I went online and I saw that it's posted as a credit. So that's why I wrote to you to determine whether this is actual refund for the carbon tax that you paid, or this is just a tax credit, which really wouldn't help anyone with a low income because it's applied against your taxable income. If you don't have any or have very little taxable income, it doesn't benefit you. And so either it's sitting there in perpetuity, or at some point they're going to release it, or it is indeed a tax credit, which would never get into the hands of people that have a low income. And the more I thought of that, I thought this is a disgrace if this is the case, because there'd be millions of people across Canada that would benefit nothing, even though, you know, I laughed when I heard that the government's going to take money from you and then give more back. I mean, that's never happened ever in history. they're probably the least efficient body to divvy out money that they've taken from you. And then they would hire, what bothered me, they're probably going to hire a lot more people and then claim they're creating jobs by having somebody manage the carbon tax files. And these files, the costs are going to go up every year after this. Like mine, I got a notice from my propane supplier that the carbon tax would amount to about 3.4 cents per liter. So propane, I was shocked. Last year, I being a good environmentalist, I got rid of my wood burner, oil burner combination furnace. It was near death anyway, so I thought I'll go to something cleaner. Natural gas isn't available here, so I went to propane. And by Christmas, I was shocked at the cost. Like it was for the year, for that from October last year until about April this year, my charges were over $2,000 for propane. I was astounded by it. I could buy 8 cords of wood for that.
So how much was the tax in total, the carbon tax?
I'm not sure whenever that was applied. It wouldn't have been. I don't have the breakdown on the liters that they provided. I just know that one month my propane bill was $381, and the tax was included in that. But I don't know. I don't think it applied to the early months. I think it only came in December, was it?
That's right. When they
January
started, when they got rid of that provincially, and that's when the feds decided to impose that on us, and that's still in the courts. So you're mentioning you don't have access to natural gas, but Bernard was telling me on the way down that he has natural gas and it has a carbon tax too. And how much is it?
4.4 cents.
4.5 cents.
4.4 cents per cubic meter.
Cubic meter.
Yeah, you have to work out. I don't know how you go from liters to cubic meters of gas. So, so it may be a little higher. It sounds like than it is for propane. But natural gas is much less expensive right now.
That can all change. It depends on supply. We had one winter here where it was difficult to get propane because so many refineries were under repair, or for whatever reason we didn't have enough, and they were giving the propane to the schools and public places first and to the homeowners last. So as long as there's not a shortage, you should be able to get by.
It's still remarkable though that the propane, when you see the little cans in the stores, you're looking at $7 or $8 for a 1 pound container. So that's probably 50 or 60 times more than what propane is to have it delivered to your home, but still far higher than natural gas right now. So I really, from the point of economics, I think I mentioned in my email that by Christmas, when I returned from a visit after Christmas, I turned my thermostat down to 14 degrees. And anyway, last fall I'd also installed 3 220 volt electric heaters. So I've got an alternative. If one fails, I've got the propane. Otherwise, I can use the electrical one. The electrical one, you can place them wherever you want them. I've got 2 in the walls and a couple baseboard heaters, so I can turn them on when needed. So I was using that. And the thermostat set at 14. And it's just chilly if you're up and working and stuff, and it was nice to sleep like that, but in the evening you want to watch TV, it gets quite chilly. So I had my 220 volt electric heaters on, and I saw my hydro bill shoot up. So I thought, oh my, you can't win either way with these. So I turned my thermostat in February down to 12. I had the rest of the winter like that.
12 degrees during the day?
Yeah. So it was the day and night. So,
day and night?
Yeah. So my dog and I would watch TV with a blanket around the two of us. And, you know, it's tolerable, but it's not convenient or fun, because there's times when you just get really cold. And so sort of look forward to going to bed and getting some decent blankets over you. So if people have to live like that, I wish some of these carbon tax promoters would experience that. And I'm alone, so, but if I had children, what does a family do when they've got a low income or they're unemployed?
Well,
That's terrible.
I'll tell you what some people do. We've had a couple of very bad cases. So they would be without a home and living in a trailer, and they would keep a candle going by their bed. And there have been incidents locally even where the person fell asleep and the flame caught fire and they were badly burned. So it is, and to our great fortune, we have phenomenal paramedics, and when the cold snaps happen, they go door to door to make sure the elderly are doing okay. So with your propane furnace, does it require electricity at all to turn on a fan?
Yes.
So you have electric radiator heaters as well as the propane. What happens when the power goes out?
Well, that's it.
It happens all the time around here.
I guess I'll have to get some candles.
Yeah.
No, I've made the decision.
Don't get candles to keep yourself warm, okay?
No, I'm just joking.
Okay.
With that. But I made the decision that I was burning a lot of wood prior to this, but it was a very inefficient furnace. So I recently purchased a new wood-burning high-efficiency stove, and I've been slowly accumulating the pipes and parts, and I'll have to hire someone to put it together and install it. But I see that as the only way to heat the house if you lose electricity,
Right.
or if you can't really afford to pay $200 or $300 a month for propane. Like, I'm on a plan where I pay $200 a month for 10 months of the year, so I don't know what this next year is going to be like, or whether that contract is going to make problems, because if I use a high efficiency wood furnace, then my propane consumption is going to go way down, hopefully to near zero.
So do you know how much ash you have from that? Or is it pellet or is it actual logs?
No, it's actual wood, and I had last year cut 5 cords of wood. I bought a whole pile of it. So I sold some of it after I got the new furnace, thinking my problems were solved. No. So I've got 3.5 cords of nice, dry, really good seasoned wood out in the woodshed behind the garage. So I can use that, and I think with the high efficiency furnace compared to the other one I had, it should probably get by with a cord and a half of wood for the winter. I think. And of course, I'm putting in floor grates and little blowers to take the heat from the basement where the burner will be and distribute it through the house. So that's added a lot of extra work, but it hopefully should solve the heat problem.
There's nothing like the feel of wood heat. It's the best of all.
And the site too.
So are you in a well here?
Yes.
Okay. So then the geothermal is. Do you know how many gallons a minute you have?
I had it run. I did a test out when I first moved in, and I ran it continuously for about 9 hours, full tilt, and then it started to stall. So, assuming 200 gallons an hour,
Wow.
something like that. I would think it'd be something like
Oh
that.
yeah. So if the
6 gallons a minute.
if the technology was affordable, then it might be something to consider. It's still pretty
There are some
pricier.
that have geothermal here, and it's a great place because there's all kinds of springs in this area. It's all hard pan clay under the soil, and it's like it's rock and clay, but there's springs because we're in a lower elevation than the fields back here. Even though there's drainage along the back now, there's still a lot of water that creeps up. I know some people further towards Westmeath, they weren't flooded, but they had, because of all their water laying in the fields, they actually had water coming up through their floor because they had springs there too. It ruined all of their floors. So it got nothing to do with the flooding or climate change, but they had water coming into a house that's on a high elevation because of the spring water, the pressure as the water table climbs.
Yeah, I have friends who have an artesian well that they draw from, and same sort of thing. Just laid down a floor. It always happens that way. Brand new floor, and then it came out. Well, I've got some bad news for you. the current government is going to impose another fuel tax. And this one, they're going to require industry that emits carbon to pay the government, so the government can invest in technology and the company can then buy it back. So that's the bad news, but I have some good news. So it means a lot of work beforehand, though, and a lot of work is going to come whether we want to or not. It's an upcoming election, and Andrew Scheer has said with the Conservatives, we will reduce emissions without imposing a tax and by putting limits on industry. However, the difference between the Liberal plan to reduce emissions at the industrial level and ours is that the industries will allocate money themselves rather than it going to the government and going through the grind. They will have to do it. And we've had industries here because this is a nuclear valley where we've got a number of spin-offs, and they have to get their emissions down, but they don't pay the government if they're over, unless there's a fine if they're really over. They're required to put it into technology to bring those levels down. So there is hope at the end. And
well, I hope they don't start going after people that have wood furnaces or wood heaters, because in this area, all the communities here on the little peninsula, I'd say at least half burn wood for most of the winter. And there's strict control here on burning in the summer, in the drier periods, but in the winter, just about everybody that I know of, I'd say more than half, probably 75%, burn some wood during the winter for cozy living rooms or as a major source of heat. So
an emergency. I know we've got because the power goes out so often all through here, not just Lapasse, but Laurentian Valley Township. So
no, I'm looking at that as a means that would cost far less than propane or other sources like oil. I wanted to get rid of that from the word go. It's sort of a nasty product. I could see other uses for it, but for home heating, no. It's not very clean at all.
Some municipalities in larger cities have banned it, but I don't think our local municipalities would ever impose that upon us, because they know their community, they know the people who live there, and they know that wood heat is a basic way of heating our homes. Some people have wood furnaces alone. They've got the outside and
I've seen those.
Yeah.
When I worked in Yellowknife, it's all oil heat up there, and some poor people, unfortunate people.
Oil heat?
It's almost all oil because there's no natural gas lines yet. You've got massive reserves up there, so it's mainly oil. There's not a lot of wood burning because the wood isn't that great there in that location. Other areas, they've got good sources of wood. But walking to work in the morning, the snow has got this sort of grayish appearance, and that is soot and everything else that's coming off the oil burners. And it told me it's not a very clean form of energy. At that time too, the furnaces were probably not all that efficient. So they put out a lot more. Not that you can. Yellowknife had a lot of problems with emissions. Put it that way.
So just to go a little further between then and hopefully the future, when we've got a new government, Andrew Scheer has said that a Conservative government will also eliminate the GST for home heating. So that's a little bit of a help, even if the prices go up.
That's quite a bit actually. That's what, 13% here?
Well, that's HST.
Oh, okay.
So because the portion is 5% right now. The balance is provincial sales tax, and the feds cannot or should not, because they're messing with the carbon tax, trying to impose it upon us. We're not going to impact how the province taxes its population. And the other thing is, if you were doing the renovations and you were using something that would help you conserve energy, there will be a program in place as well to some grants. So
Like for insulating.
for insulating, or if you're in a situation where you have to change your furnace for some reason, it would probably be applicable to a ground source heat pump. They had that back in the 80s, and it was a huge help.
Yeah, I recall the insulating program they had. It was for if you could afford to use it, it was very beneficial. But I lived in near Huntsville at that time, and a lot of people didn't have the income to take advantage of it.
And they had to have an inspection first, and
Yes.
most of the money went to the inspection rather than actually putting it in.
Yeah.
Okay.
So-
Well, I want to thank you very much, Carl, for inviting me to your home and explaining not just to me but to all the followers how this carbon tax impacts everyday Canadians, and how much of a struggle and how unaffordable it's making life.
Well, on top of the economic hardship it can cause, I just see it as just absolute useless, ineffective. Even if everyone in Canada went to zero emissions, it's not even a burp in the climate or in the carbon cycle on the global scale.
So, what's your background?
I have a Master's of Science.
Master's of Science.
And, I worked my whole career in the environmental field,
Environmental field.
mostly water and doing research. And the last few years was all on a different scale. Was managed a unit called the Ecosystem Monitoring Program.
So, what did you monitor?
Well, that's the hard thing. It got to the point where some people in the department I was in, they wanted to focus on global warming. And I thought, this is ridiculous. We've got, like in Montreal, sewage, and you got far more hazardous situations all across Canada. And the understanding at that time, or even now, they have so little on the basis to connect global warming or climate change, the undefined thing called climate change, to any impact. You can immediately determine when someone cuts down a forest that there's erosion and all things like that. You put sewage into the St. Lawrence River, there's impacts downstream, but they'd never tell you about it. They'll concentrate on what I call trivial things, like, and this one I see it as mythical. It's beyond anything science can even measure, yet alone if you can't measure it, how can you determine whether it's a cause of any impact? Like this ridiculous claim here that flooding was due to, or that if the carbon tax can prevent flooding. Really? I mean, this is ridiculous.
And it's not even laughable for the people who
No.
are experiencing. They don't know what to do, whether to build, rebuild, if they're going to be allowed to rebuild. And yeah, it was pretty heartless to just make that kind of statement. Okay,
Well,
so
I wish you great success in your election campaign. I'll be around if you need some more information. So
all right. Well, thank you again
Thank you.
very much, Carl.
thank you.